Welcome to Dr. Lottie's Science with Soul. I'm Dr. Lottie and the host of this podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce a very special guest, Karen Newell. Karen Newell is the author and specialist in personal development with a diverse body of work that rests upon the foundation of heart-centered consciousness. Her personal growth programs, workshops, guided meditations, and teachings enable individuals to achieve life transformations towards greater self-fulfillment and contentment, quality relationships, and choices aligned with one's soul's calling. As an innovator in the emerging field of brainwave entrainment audio meditation, Karen empowers others in their journeys of self-discovery. Using Sacred Acoustics recordings and other techniques, she teaches how to enter and engage with your inner world to connect to guidance, achieve inspiration, improve wellness, and develop intuition. Karen is the co-author with Eben Alexander III, MD, of Living in a Mindful Universe. At international workshops presented with Dr. Alexander, Karen demonstrates key practices of consciousness exploration, heart awareness, intention, maintaining neutrality, emotional management, and cultivating internal knowing. So welcome, Karen. It's an honor to have you as a guest today.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
So I know you worked in the corporate world before you got into all this meditation and brainwave entrainment. How did that journey begin? What led you to go into this field of work and explore brainwave entrainment audio meditation?
Well, at first, it wasn't really entering a field of work. It was actually just trying to grow personally. And yes, I worked for 25 years in the corporate world in the print publishing industry, which evolved during that time, technically into web development and all kinds of innovations. And while it was really exciting to, be a part of all of those technical innovations, and I also managed the art department, so I got to juggle creative work with very analytical work, something was missing. It wasn't enough. I wasn't satisfied. It didn't feel like I was really fulfilling why I came to this world. It was certainly fulfilling me as a career, but not as a person. And I was raising a daughter at the time and going through different relationships. And as I was, just dealing with all the substance of life, I had this drive to really understand why are we here and what is our purpose. And all of that stemmed from childhood, like many of us have those questions. And so as I'm going through my life, those questions were still kind of bothering me. And I couldn't find answers to those questions in traditional Christian religion or through, scientific study. No one could really satisfy me with that answer. And I set about in my spare time doing a lot of reading of sort of kind of alternative texts to the traditional. So alternative spiritual texts, alternative to the traditional, really any kind of reading. So this involved exploring Eastern religions. It involved exploring concepts of meditation. And what I came to realize is understanding these concepts can only take you so far. It's the actual experience that can really help you to grow. And so I would read about people who had these, abilities to have precognition of events. I would read about the benefits of meditation, how this would really help you physically with your physical immune system, but also open you up your intuitive abilities. And all of that really intrigued me. And so I set about not really joining a group or a particular tradition, but trying out different sorts of meditative techniques. And as I would do this, I would sit down, and the kind of basic meditative technique is to sit still and close your eyes and then just pay attention to your breath. And so I would do this for just a few minutes at a time. And I thought at first it was a complete waste of time, because all that would happen for me is, I was a busy project manager, as I said, and all of these lists of things I needed to do, or conversations I needed to have, or reliving conversations I'd already had. this is what would go on in my mind during meditation. So I convinced myself I really wasn't capable, that I was more of a left-brained person, as they say, who really was satisfied doing tasks and things and thinking about things, not necessarily absorbing into a nothingness. And yet, over time, I kept hearing, as I took workshop after workshop, trying to learn more about why are we here and what is our purpose, the foundation of meditation was so important. And so I continued to try other techniques. And eventually I learned that a certain quality of sound helped me to get into a quieter state where I didn't have those lists of things running through my mind. And those types of sounds were things like tuning forks or gongs or crystal bowls or brass bowls. And if you're familiar with those types of sounds, you know that it's pretty monotonous, but then there'll be this sort of wavering, like wah, wah, wah. And somehow that type of sound helped me to get into a quieter state of mind. And eventually I came across the audio brainwave entrainment technology that really took me to the next level. And I can explain more about that further in the conversation. But what I realized is binaural beats or brainwave entrainment also create that wah, wah, wah sound. So eventually, my business partner and I came to realize that brass bowls, tuning forks, and gongs were putting out natural, what we now call binaural beats. And so it's no wonder that they help to quiet the mind. And shamans and other spiritual traditions who use these types of sounds to help people get into expanded states of awareness is where I found myself, that these were the tools that really helped me to go within, to quiet the mind, to learn more about why I am here and what is my purpose. And here we are today.
Wow, that's just fascinating how it started with the singing bowls and the tuning forks, and one thing led to another. So at what point during your journey did you then found your company? You're a co-founder of Sacred Acoustics. So how did that all come about?
Well, this took a little time to come about. I would say I spent about 2.5 years in what I came to call at the time my spiritual boot camp. And this is where I was taking class after class in all different traditions. And what I came to realize is that people in these classes, many of them would report these amazing experiences using a specific technique, but not everyone would. And sometimes I would be sitting there thinking, gosh, well, I wish that could happen for me, but it's not. And again, it was this audio technology that I would attend workshops and hear all of these people talk about their different experiences. And it wasn't so easy for me. And for many of us, it's not. And when that audio technology became a big success for me is when I happened to meet someone named Kevin Causey. And he was a mechanical electrical engineer who lives in Manhattan. He's actually a born and bred New York City person, so he's very intense. And he told me he wanted to become an audio engineer. And, you know, he had the engineering aptitude. You take things apart, you put them back together. And he learned that I had this vast library of different audio technology. And so he and I sort of formed this partnership where I would share with him these different audio sounds that I had, and then we would together analyze them over a Skype screen. You know how common it is nowadays for people to accomplish things over Zoom or Skype. That's what we were doing, you know, I guess about 10 years ago, 2010. Yeah, about 8 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago. And as we were doing this, we took apart our favorite type of audio technology that had the best effects, and we put it back together in ways that had even more superior effects. And as we were doing all of this, almost every night, he was in New York, I was in Baltimore, Maryland at the time. We would coordinate via text message and say, okay, I'm listening now. And then when our the recordings that he would create, the test recordings, when we were finished listening, we would get on the phone and talk to each other about our experience. And this became quite a little boot camp indeed, because then I was able to really validate some of the experiences I was having with Kevin, because he would sometimes have similar experiences to mine. And we had been doing this for about a year. We called it our hobby. Occasionally I would say, why are we so obsessed with this thing? You know, we had our day jobs, but this is what we would do evenings and weekends, while other people were going out having dates and taking care of their children and things like that. And he would say, well, I think it's for humanity. And I just did not understand what he was talking about, of course, until we both met Dr. Eben Alexander. And I think he's been a guest on your program. He wrote that book, Proof of Heaven, a neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife. And when I met him, he had already had that experience about 3 years previously, but his book had not come out. In fact, he didn't even have an agent or a publisher at that point. But I knew he had had a near-death experience. I knew that others had had near-death experiences. I had known others who also had near-death experiences. So I was kind of familiar with the concept. And we actually invited him to listen to our sounds. And it was about 2 months after we met that he was in New York meeting with publishers, as it happens. And Kevin went to his hotel room, hooked him up to our rudimentary EEG device, you know, hooking to the forehead to read his brain waves. And he listened to some of our recordings and had just a most amazing experience. We actually invited him, all three of us were listening together. The three of us got on the phone and shared our experience. And that began a three-way hobby of when Eben returned to his home in Virginia. We began these three-way, what we began to call sound journeys. And it was Eben, as his book was getting ready to be published, he highly encouraged us to make these recordings available to others, because he had this mission of teaching people that they could find out these kinds of answers to questions like, why are we here and what is our purpose? They could find out themselves by cultivating experience. And since I had spent the last, you know, many years, several 3 to 5 years of doing just that, Eben wanted us to make these recordings available, and he invited me to help teach others how exactly to engender these expanded states of awareness. So that's how Sacred Acoustics ended up being created.
Wow. And so now people can go to your website, sacredacoustics.com, and there's all different types of brainwave entrainment audio meditations available. So what kind of things are available for people? How can this help people?
Okay, well, I'll start with the most basic way that this can help people. And we actually did a pilot study that took place in a busy New York psychiatric practice. And Dr. Anna Yusum, a psychiatrist who went to Yale, she performed this pilot study with the patients in her practice. And what she did is she gave them recordings that I provided along with certain listening protocols, so they would know, you know, how to work them into their routine. We made it very flexible so that people could listen to these recordings at any time during the day. And they were designed to help people get better sleep, to help people focus. And this is what we asked people to do. And at the end of listening for at least 2 weeks, she noticed, or she recorded the data, that anxiety was reduced by 26%, just with 2 weeks of listening, of adding this to their daily routine. And patients in her practice who did not add these recordings to her routine, to their routine, the control group, they saw their anxiety reduced by only 7% during that same time. So to Anna, this was an absolute miracle, really, to help people have such a significant effect in such a short amount of time. And interesting, she recorded the anxiety reduction using the state trait anxiety inventory that quantifies someone's level of anxiety, often used in studies in the psychology world. But she also got all of these interesting anecdotal reports from her patients. So someone who had been in a toxic relationship for years was finally able to leave that relationship. A medical student who had a lot of anxiety over her board exams found that she was able to focus better on those exams, to get better sleep, so that she was more well rested for the exams. So just this overall kind of general improvement in people's lives in a lot of different areas. And so this is one way people can benefit from these recordings. And at the 2 years ago, right about this time, when COVID started and all of the lockdowns began and everyone's lives changed around the world, we wanted to do our part, and we made that exact recording bundle. It's called the Whole Mind Bundle. That exact set of recordings we made available at a significantly reduced price. And we have also made it, and it remains free for those who are in financial difficulty. So those are very often the people who have the most anxiety. And my belief system is one that knows that anyone who's having anxiety in this world is also affecting my level of consciousness. And so for me, I know that when I do the efforts to quiet my mind, that I'm also helping others around me. And so I have tremendous gratitude for anyone who will take the time using any technique, not just Sacred Acoustics recordings, to quiet the mind, to find inner peace from within, to find a sense of understanding about what their purpose is of being here. This helps all of us. And so this is why we made them available. You can access those recordings, the Whole Mind Bundle, at our website, and you can also download a free 20-minute, what we call our Om recording. And this is a file that many people never move off of. They listen to this 20 minutes a day, and it does the trick. And it helps quiet the mind and get them into a nice meditative state. And from there, people have found that they're able to improve their dream life. They're able to induce lucid dreams in some cases. Some people have found, including myself, that while listening to these recordings, seems to trigger these kind of unexpected emotions. And over time, I learned that I was actually triggering unprocessed emotions that had been stored in my system decades ago. And very often, as you're going through your life and you feel, yourself feeling emotional, often it's from a trigger in the outside world, but really it's just something that's inside of you that is triggered in that moment. And so listening to these recordings over many months has helped me to, and years really, has helped me to quiet the mind enough that it's less likely that I'll have an emotional outburst in a given stressful situation. I'm able to more readily understand the bigger picture, and all of us can learn how to do this. And wouldn't it be such a wonderful world if people weren't so reactive with their emotions, if they understood that, oh, that's just something inside of me that I didn't process from long ago. Let me take care of that. This is what more and more people are beginning to do in this world with the help of Sacred Acoustics recordings and other techniques. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And I love the topic of your podcast because it really speaks to the soul and how we can bring the soul more into our daily life, and not just as some amorphous thing that maybe we'll get in touch with after we die. I mean, it's really right here, right now, that we can bring that into our lives.
So can you, let's say somebody has problems, let's say they have insomnia, they have difficulty going to sleep, or they sleep a few hours and then they wake up. Is this something that could help people with insomnia?
Yes, and I happen to be an insomniac. And so I know how, just a tiny little thing can help so much. Now, I will have a disclaimer. I do not mean to suggest by any means that these recordings will help every single person in equal ways. All of us are different. One thing to remember is that our brainwaves are very unique. In fact, when you measure a person's brainwaves with an EEG, they're as unique as fingerprints. You can actually identify people by their brainwaves. And so that just goes to show that we're all sort of starting from a different sort of foundation. And so some of us, when we listen to these recordings, will find it very easily to fall asleep. In fact, one of the complaints people have is instead of going into a meditative state, they just fall asleep. And I think, well, isn't that great? You're going to get some rest. And then once you're well rested, you can try for that meditative state. But yes, there are recordings that we have. One is called Sacred Sleep. One is called Whole Delta. Anything that has delta frequencies. Delta frequencies are the state we're in when we're sleeping. And so this kind of makes me realize I should explain what binaural beats are really designed to do. And that is to bring the brain into these lower states of awareness so that we can begin to manage our thoughts and emotions more efficiently. And so the delta range, 0 to 4 hertz, that's the state we're in when we're asleep. 4 to 7 hertz, that's the theta range, often associated with deep states of meditation, but also creativity and intuition and telepathy, things like that. Up from there, 8 to 12 hertz, that's the alpha range. That range is associated with focus, with a focused mind. So if you're working very intently on a spreadsheet or you're reading very intently, that's the alpha state. 12 to 30 hertz, that's the beta state. That's the state we're in when we're walking, we're talking, when those thoughts are racing through our minds. That's the beta state, 12 to 30 hertz. That's the state we're trying to help the brain move out of into the lower, slower states of awareness associated with sleep, with meditation, and with focus. And so we often feed those frequencies right around between the delta and theta range, right around 4 hertz, because that's the state between awake and asleep, where the body can become profoundly relaxed, which helps quiet those racing thoughts, but the mind can still stay aware and alert. And binaural beats are created by feeding one signal to one ear, a slightly different frequency to the other ear. So I'll use the example of 100 hertz in one ear, 104 hertz in the other ear. It's that 4 hertz difference that indicates we're sending a delta, or the border between delta and theta frequency, to the ear. And so that's what creates that wavering sound, that wah, wah, wah. But Sacred Acoustics recordings also include monaural beats. And so that's where you hear just one, like a drum beat, over and over again. And so we combine monaural and binaural beats to create what we call neural helix. So some people call it hemisync, holosync. There's lots of different names. We call it neural helix because we are adding those monaural beats. And it happens to be that the visual image that appears in frequency analyzers, it looks like a helix when you combine the like a DNA strand, when you combine the monaural and the binaural. So there's a real science behind it. And while we're affecting the brain in the sense that we're slowing down the brain waves, it's really the mind, engaging the mind with intention, with attention, to really, that's what really starts to affect the change. The binaural beats serve kind of like, I would say, training wheels that kind of give you that support to get into a meditative state. I know Tibetan monks, of course, they're considered experts when they've meditated for 10,000 hours. Tibetan monks who listen to these recordings say, oh my gosh, this can take me to that place so much faster. The caution is, if you move too fast into these spiritual types of states, sometimes things can happen a little bit that are unexpected and can sometimes throw people off a little bit. And that, I would say, sometimes happens when people have symptoms of out-of-body experience, for example, or they start to see orbs of light floating around in their home. They start to open up spiritually before they're quite ready. And so that's why many spiritual masters might suggest that binaural beats can be dangerous in that fashion. But if you're someone who has your wits about you and you're prepared for this sort of thing, I would say it's an excellent way to sort of jumpstart that meditative practice. Here in the West, our Western mind, we can't fathom 10,000 hours of meditation when we have jobs and, sports and other activities that we do. And so they really can help to jumpstart a meditative practice in a way that's very satisfying for the Western mind. It was for me, because finally I get some results I notice that my mind is quieter. And even then it can take 18 months to maybe two years of listening before most people might start to experience those kinds of effects.
So I know you studied meditation, lucid dreaming, astral travel, telepathy. Um, is this something, if people listen to these meditations with the binaural beats, and can they learn how to astral travel?
Yes, absolutely. You can learn how to do many things. Many of us just want to get in touch with our intuition and, solve problems by asking questions of our expanded self, and that's possible. Lucid dreaming is possible. Astral travel is certainly possible. I would say that it's very useful to also combine other types of techniques if that's the goal. And so astral travel is the idea that our awareness can actually leave the physical body, travel around, and then come back to the body. And a classic out-of-body experience would involve someone actually being aware of their etheric body and looking down potentially at their physical body still lying in bed. That's sort of a classic out-of-body experience. And my way of generating that, sometimes these will happen to people unbidden, just spontaneously. But if you can manage that experience, it just makes you feel a lot more stable. And for me, it involved employing a lot of mental techniques of movement. And so I learned these from different teachers. Sometimes you just imagine yourself climbing upstairs or going up an elevator. Maybe it's easier to go downstairs or go down an elevator. Other people have techniques where they imagine themselves sort of rolling out of their body in a more horizontal kind of roll. One technique that worked very well for me is that I would lie in bed every night as I was falling asleep, and I would imagine that all of my energy was leaving my body out the top of my head. And then it would go as far as I could imagine it going. And then it would come back whoosh through my body out the bottom of my feet. And I would imagine as I laid there horizontally, my energy moving in and out of the body in very grand sweeping fashion. So really anything that, any visualization that kind of takes your energy outside of the body is excellent. And it's the binaural beats that help many people have the body become, as I said before, profoundly relaxed while the mind is still aware. Because when you're having an out-of-body experience, the physical body will be very, very still. There's nothing in it to animate it. And many people suggest that we actually every night, some part of us leaves the body and returns to it. And many of us maybe have experienced what's known as that sleep paralysis, where your awareness is alert, but you can't move your body. And so my thought now is that potentially because the rest of us hasn't quite returned to the body. And this is nothing to really get alarmed about if anyone is getting alarmed. It's a perfectly natural process. We're just not aware of it. Another symptom that might take place for someone who's about to have an out-of-body experience, which often surprises people, and they tell me about it, and I've had it too, is this rushing, loud, sort of tornado sound in the ears. And it can be very disconcerting and frighten people. But the trick is to sort of balance that desire, if you have one, to have the out-of-body experience, and that expectation of when and how it will actually take place. It's quite a balancing technique that one needs to practice if that's something that you'd like to cultivate. And so Sacred Acoustics recordings help with that, but also these visual techniques. And Light Body is a recording that we offer that has most often helped people generate out-of-body experiences. And part of that is the frequencies that are included. In this recording, we actually include gamma frequencies, which are above 30 hertz, not as common to include in binaural beats because 30 hertz is a long way apart to feed two different signals to the ear. 100, 130 hertz wouldn't make that same type of sound. At any rate, we do include the gamma frequencies, and that may be contributing to the out-of-body results, but I believe it more has to do with the verbal guidance that's included on that particular recording, because it's asking you to imagine your body's energy spinning in different directions and moving out the body in the way I just described. And so I think it's a combination of techniques, but I do believe that pretty much anyone, if they put their mind to it and they put in the practice, just like any other skill or technique, it can be learned by nearly everyone.
Yeah, it's just fascinating that with sound it can help us attain these different states that can take years of just sitting in regular meditation, but it sort of speeds up that process. And I know you live your life with a daily connection with universal consciousness. What do you mean by that? And can anybody learn to live this way?
What I mean by that is I maintain a big picture perspective at all times. And so when I encounter an argument or a conflict, or I notice myself reacting to something in the news or something someone has said, I can very quickly tap into that greater part of myself who understands that that's just a trigger, or that person said that from this place, not the place that you're reacting to. I'm able to maintain this very calm, grounded sense that all is well, that there is a purpose for everything. And it's not simple when all of the crazy things are going on in this world, right? All of the things that we've all had to deal with over the last many months. It's not simple, but it's really just this idea that there's a bigger picture thing going on, that when my lifetime ends, that my awareness will continue on to another part of the journey, that this is an opportunity for learning and growing, and that if I'm not taking advantage of that opportunity, I'm missing out on why I'm actually here. And so that's the way I sort of live through this connection to the greater consciousness, is maintaining that perspective at all times. And again, sometimes it's a dual perspective. So I might find myself slipping. I don't want to, I'm no saint. I might slip in some moments, but another part of me is observing and knowing, okay, this is what's really going on here. And so I have this sort of dual awareness. Sometimes, people talk about duality and, oneness versus duality. And I am of the opinion that we can hold both types of states of mind, that we can feel that connection to something greater, feel and know that we're all connected through one mind, but that also I have this personality and this body that's my way of working in the world, and we all do. And all of us are critical to this world. All of us are critical to the one mind. I have the belief that, and science supports it, that we are all connected through this one mind, that ultimately we are one. And having that awareness of knowing just sort of embedded into my belief system helps me to respect all people, no matter what their beliefs, no matter what their race, ethnicity, cultural understanding. All of us are critical to this whole. And that's basically how I would explain living this connection on a daily basis. So it's bringing that awareness into my daily activities. And again, it's not simple with some of the things we're faced with, but it's very satisfying when it's successful.
Now, do you also, I know you talk about heart-centered consciousness. How does that fit into this picture?
Well, I did a lot of study of HeartMath. HeartMath Institute is a scientific organization. It's been around for decades in Northern California, and it studies the heart, and specifically the electromagnetic field of the heart. And what they have found is that electromagnetic field, the brain puts out an electromagnetic field too. So does the earth. Almost every sort of energy center puts out an electromagnetic field. But what's interesting about the hearts is that it is much bigger than the brains. And so the electric part of that field is 60 times greater than the brains. But the magnetic part of that field is, I'm forgetting my number, it's either 3,000 or 5,000. I think it's 3,000 times bigger than the brains. Huge. And it expands and contracts around the body. And that expansion is based on your emotional state. So a heart that's expressing joy and love and happiness is going to have a much greater, much larger electromagnetic field than someone who's feeling sad, depressed, or anxious. And so this electromagnetic field seems to affect the people around us. They've done studies where someone will sit across from someone else at a table. So the one person who knows what's going on is performing what HeartMath calls a coherence technique. And that's basically just the act of generating a feeling of gratitude in the heart, not just thoughts of gratitude, but an actual feeling. That's another thing that people can practice. It's not necessarily easy to generate all at once, but it involves recalling events or experiences that you've had that you had this extreme gratitude. So you sort of relive that and you can generate that feeling. And so the person sitting across the table from the one generating these feelings of gratitude or coherence actually has their brain waves affected and their heart rate variability. So think about if you ever worked in an office or you're at a party or something like that, and someone walks in the room and we all notice they have a big smile and we just feel happier when they're around. That's that electromagnetic field in action. Whereas if someone walks in the room and is angry about the weather or the traffic, you don't want to be around that. They make you feel a little uncomfortable. That's the electromagnetic field in action. And it's my understanding, just from my personal observations, and also some of the HeartMath research, that somehow this electromagnetic field is going out into the world. It seems to be gathering information to come back into the heart. And the heart actually sends that information up to the brain. The heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. And so having this understanding that the brain is not necessarily the most powerful organ in the body, like we like to think that the brain controls everything, but the heart actually has its own neurons. I know that the gut and other parts of the body has neurons too. Many parts of the body are having, I guess, executive function in a fashion, and then they all have to get together and figure it out. But the heart is sending a lot more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. And when I learned all of this about the brain, about the heart, especially as how the heart affects people around us, I took that very seriously. I understand that whatever is in my heart is going to affect people around me. And I want to only affect people in beneficial ways. I don't want to give them my stuff. I don't want my emotional angst to be making other people feel emotionally anxious, which is actually what happens. And that's why at the beginning of this program, I said that I'm so grateful for people who take the time to do this, because you're helping all of us. You're helping the people around you and really everyone in this world through that one mind connection. So living with heart-centered consciousness is that understanding that my emotional state will affect people around me. And so I want to always be leading with my heart in a positive way. And again, I fail sometimes. I have my moments of upset and where I lose my cool. But something that I also highly recommend stems from the life review that so many near-death experiencers talk about. And that's what I call a daily review. So rather than waiting till the end of your life, where you kind of relive the actions that caused other people pain, I would rather do that as I go along. And so very often, if I do have one of those moments where I slip, as I'm lying in bed that night, or as I'm sitting in contemplative meditation, I'll recall that moment and I'll think, what could I have done differently? How can I make amends if I hurt anyone's feelings? This is how I live a heart-centered consciousness. And I feel that the more people who have this awareness, the more positive our world will be. I often ask people to imagine a world where every child grows up understanding this concept. And it's almost the ultimate golden rule, right? The idea that we want to treat others as we want to be treated. Well, I would like to be around other hearts that are clear and happy. And so how do I do that? I make my heart clear and happy. So imagine a world where every child knows how to do this. And eventually every parent knows how to do the same thing. every doctor, every bus driver, every waitress, every CEO, every politician. Just imagine a world where people live that way and they have deep caring for the people around them through that ultimate golden rule. That's a world I love to spend my time imagining.
No, that's just beautiful, and that's exactly what I preach myself, because if we can, I tell everybody, if I can just help facilitate healing for one person, that's going to change that person's heart, and then they attract and resonate and entrain with other people and
Yes.
help other people heal, just because they created healing for themselves. And it sort of just spreads, and it is exactly what the world needs today. It's just more people that can tune into existing in that way. So I know that you also wrote a book together with Dr. Eben Alexander, and it's called Living in a Mindful Universe. Can you tell us a little bit about what that book is about?
Well, living in a mindful universe is really bringing together very heavy scientific concepts with spiritual concepts. And I don't mean religious concepts, I mean spiritual concepts. And so the scientific world for so long has just denied the existence of the spiritual world and sort of given it over to religions to have any say on that. But in fact, there is scientific evidence that shows the spiritual realm is actually real. And so we bring together those concepts in the book, and I co-authored it with Eben Alexander. And so for him, it's a sort of continuation of his memoir, sort of the sequel to his first book, Proof of Heaven, because he continues the story of his journey beyond when he woke up 4 months after his near-death experience. But it's also the story of how I and many others have cultivated these same types of experiences that near-death experiencers report to us. And that's the idea that we can, that our awareness really continues beyond death of the physical body. So if we are able to manage that awareness now with some level of skill, we'll have a different sort of transition when that moment of death comes. Many of us kind of ignore all of that, but living in a mindful universe, the subtitle is a neurosurgeon's journey into the heart of consciousness. And so we do spend time very much talking about the heart, the real meat, the concept of consciousness, but also it's a double meaning because we talk about the importance of love and living from the heart and how important it is. The Beatles said it, Rumi has said it, everyone seems to say love is all there is, and yet I don't quite see it manifesting in our world the way I think it really could. And the COVID pandemic challenge has brought many of us closer to that love. Many times it's those challenges that really make us see how important those bonds with other people really are. It's those crises, the war in Ukraine that's taking place. Those crises make us care for other people even more. But what if we had a world where it didn't take a crisis for us to show caring to our fellow beings? And that's something that living in a mindful universe hits hard at, that we really can change the world. And each of us just needs to make that effort to live from the heart, to understand that we are more than our physical bodies, that we continue beyond death of the physical body, which really changes everything about how we live now. So it's less about what happens when we die, but how that information can serve us here and now as we live our lives. So living in a mindful universe really empowers people to understand their very critical, important role in the evolution of all humanity.
That just sounds fascinating. And where can people find the book?
Well, Amazon is a great place to find it, and it's likely in some bookstores, although it may not be in all bookstores. You can go to ebenalexander.com and you'll find links to all different kinds of ways to buy it.
And is it available in paperback, hardback, audiobook?
It's available in all of those formats, in Kindle, audio. The audiobook is kind of special because Eben and I both read the audio version, but paperback, hardback, yes, all versions are available. And also they're available in other languages. I think we're in about maybe 12 other languages now, including French, German, most of the European languages.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it easy for people, for listeners in other countries. And I know you studied a lot of the meditation and the astral travel, telepathy, etc. What do you think is the purpose of our existence?
Well, that's an easy question, Dr. Lottie. But it's an excellent one. It's the question that's really driven me to do all of this. What is the point of all of it? And I have to say, my current way of looking at all of it, and it's evolving, of course, as I learn more, is that our purpose is really to learn and to grow. And that growth comes about through many ways, but most often through hardship. And so it can be hard to fathom that we came here to experience hardship. But in fact, in my personal life, that's where I've grown the most, when I've had the most angst, where I've gone through a conflict and come through the other side feeling as though I'm a better, more developed person. And so I think that's why we're here. And we're all going to do this in unique ways. We're going to learn in different ways. We're going to learn different lessons from the same experiences. And that's the beauty of it all, that while we're all one mind, we're all unique facets. Eben likes to say that we're all, facets of one beautiful diamond, and every facet is this beautiful little sparkling surface, very critical for the entire diamond. If one facet is dark, we notice, right? You notice there's no sparkle there. And so our purpose is really to be that authentic being that we came here to be. And we may not know what that is. And I know for the longest time, I wanted to know, what is my purpose? What should I be doing? What acts should I be performing? And one day I decided, because I wasn't getting any answers, that I didn't care anymore. I literally said, forget it. I used some bad language, just never mind. I don't want to know. I pretty much proclaimed to the universe, just forget it. I don't care anymore. And it was after that, after I truly let go of wanting to know, that the answer came. And the answer was to be who I am. And many of us walk around trying to satisfy other people. Many of us are in codependent relationships, or we're parenting in a way that mimics what our parents did, or whatever it is. We all have our patterns, and that we're programmed into at birth, starting at birth. But if we can break out of those patterns, tap into a greater part that maybe isn't so trapped in this world, that's our purpose too, to understand that we're primarily spiritual beings having a physical experience, and knowing that we are more than our physical bodies is certainly a first step towards understanding how we can live our purpose here and now, and bringing that soul into our being, bringing that heart into our being, learning how to express love. All of this is related to our purpose. It may sound a broad way of explaining it, but it's all related to just being the authentic being we came here to be, so that we can express our individuality in order to make the whole whole. If we're not expressing our individuality, the whole is missing that. And so it's a combination. And in our world, there's all of this kind of conflict between what's more important, individual rights or the greater good. And I would say it's a balance between both, and that both are important. And when one takes over as an extreme, the other really suffers. And so that, I think, is the challenge that humanity is up against right now, is how can we act as a whole and care for our other beings, but also be that strong, authentic person that each of us has the potential to be.
And how can people learn more about Sacred Acoustics?
We have a website, sacredacoustics.com. You can find out everything you need to know there. You can also reach out to me from there. There's a contact form, and all of those get fed through my inbox, and I see them all. And so if anyone has questions about anything or concerns, you can feel free to reach out that way. And there's also another website called innersanctumcenter.com. And this is where Eben and I, Dr. Alexander and I, host a core program that people can take at any time to sort of find that sense of inner peace. It does include some samples of Sacred Acoustics recordings. And we host live monthly Q&A sessions with people, any questions at all, and we field them once a month. So innersanctumcenter.com, people can find more about that there.
And I will put the website also in the podcast notes, so you can just go directly to the link and visit the websites. And before we wrap up, I have one more question. And if you could give a message to all the listeners today, what would that message be?
You are all unique and important, vital souls to all of humanity's existence. Many of us feel that we're not important, that we get lost in all of what seems to be more important in this world. And yet each and every one of us, of all creeds, of all beliefs, we are bound together through consciousness, and you are never alone. That consciousness is there and available to you. During a webinar series that Eben and I put out during the first year and a half of the COVID pandemic, we had something we called 11 a.m. love. And at 11 a.m., we asked everyone in the world, because people from all over the world were listening in every time zone, to generate that feeling of love in the heart and imagine that it was broadcasting to the world around you. And if you were having a bad day, if you weren't feeling so great that day, your task was to open your heart and receive all of the love that others were putting out into the world. And so this is something that I invite anyone to do, really any time of day, because people around this world are spending their time meditating, sharing love in the world. And if anyone needs a little bit of that reservoir, just open up and receive and trust that that love is there for you.
Just beautiful. And I want to thank you so much, Karen, for being a guest on the podcast today.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this line of questioning. I appreciate the opportunity.